are on our way to London for the first time, taking the train from Paris and watching the views. We were able to find a pretty cheap Airbnb in Camden Town right by the Camden Market, so pretty centrally located and close enough to all of this craziness without being too loud. The Camden Market is open every single day and it's pretty much always this busy from what I could tell, and it's filled with really great food trucks, vendors that are selling clothing, jewelry, sunglasses, bags, anything that you can think of, it's here. And there's a cute little river that runs through the entire market that makes it a little confusing to get around, but makes for some really great views. We were looking for a more relaxed vibe for coffee, so we ventured into Hampstead, which ended up being the cutest little storybook town ever. In Watch House was a coffee house that we went to that I think was one of my favorite places for coffee and food. And not to mention the vibes of having multiple bookstores right next door and a beautiful park right across the street. This is one of those places where I was like, yeah, I wish I could live here. Hampstead Heath is the name of the park that surrounds this tiny neighborhood, and it's huge. I don't think I realized how big it was until I stepped inside, and I looked it up, and it's 10% bigger than New York's Central Park, which is kind of mind-blowing to me, but also made a lot of sense because it's hard to explain, but this park just felt so much older. Like the trees were much bigger, wider, and it just felt more overgrown and wild. And it gave me a sense that I wasn't in the city at all, which was wonderful. I picked up the book Rouge by Mona Awad after reading Bunny, and to sit in a big wide open park and read about crazy skincare cults was probably the highlight of my evening. And then of course, because it was Sunday, we had to try a Sunday roast, which I'm gonna be honest, did not sound the most appetizing to me, but it did turn out better than I thought it would. So it's basically meat, potatoes, carrots, gravy, and a Yorkshire pudding, which is like a puff pastry kind of thing. I'm in London now, joined by, come here. That is my mother. And this is our first Sunday here. We just got here yesterday and we had a Sunday roast, our first ever. I got the vegetarian version, the mushroom Wellington. I thought it was so good. She had some beef to pick with her beef.
Excellent roasted carrots and potatoes.
Tea.
$5.
Close the thing. Close it so it looks cool. Close! Okay, now we gotta redo it because your face was so mean. Okay, open it. Our next day in London, we started at Primrose Hill, which is a very cute neighborhood with all these different colored buildings that is a lot less busy than Notting Hill, but still has the same charm, and it definitely lived up to it. Again, we had a great brunch and then found some of these little telephone booths, which of course we had to get some pictures in. But this neighborhood was great for just walking around and taking in the architecture, the little boutique stores, and there's a really great park right outside of it too. But the houses were my favorite just to stare at, and so colorful too. I've been wanting to read Rachel Cusk for a while, and not just because our names are similar, but I'm not really sure where to start, so I did end up just leafing through this book and putting it back, but I will get one soon enough. I just knew that I needed another book once I kept seeing how many amazing parks and open spaces there were in London. Like, obviously I could see them on the map, but once I was in person and I saw just how it feels like you're not in the city at all. It feels like you're in some secluded area, and it's so calm and peaceful and not crowded at all, and so different from my experiences in New York. It was gorgeous. I fell in love, honestly. After a break in the park, we headed over to Notting Hill, and it definitely was as busy as people said it was going to be, which at least we were kind of expecting when we got there, but the Notting Hill bookshop in particular was insane to me, just how many people wanted to take pictures and be inside, and I felt so bad for the people who work there because they have to deal with this every day, and Seems like people are just obsessed with Julia Roberts and Hugh Grant, and I get it, the movie's great, but this is kind of crazy. Anyway, there were a lot of really great vintage sellers, and we ended up finding some really cool brooches. It's been like my obsession of the moment is finding unique vintage brooches, and they had a ton here. But we didn't stay long, and we ended up getting food at some vegetarian market kind of place that was surprisingly amazing. And then walking around this posh-looking neighborhood that had a similar vibe to Primrose Hill with all the colorful buildings that I just could not get over. Since we were nearby, we had to stop at Kensington Palace, and I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting it to be this ornate. And especially trying to wrap my head around the fact that it's not just a historical building, but a place where royals currently live was kind of crazy.
Marble Arch Station.
We caught the bus quick just to say that we rode it, but the views on the second floor, right up at the front, were kind of amazing. Then it was time for high tea. I had planned this for my mom because it was her birthday, and I knew it would be kind of fancy, but this almost seemed like an overindulgence. No, it did seem like that. Continuing our tourist streak, we went over to see Big Ben and the London Eye. And Big Ben turned out to be much prettier than I thought it would be. I don't know why. I'd seen pictures before, but I thought it was kind of just this big clock. But the ornateness of the architecture and the ancient sound of the gong that it made was really interesting. We just barely caught the train in time to Windsor, but we wanted to see this one last palace before we had to head out. Unfortunately, the town was mostly closed down by the time we got there, but it had a very cute small town vibe to it, and I imagine it would be very nice to hang out in if you got there before, 5, 6 o'clock. Though, of course, the pub was still open, but we were more interested in the long walk. Mom, turn around! The long walk is, pretty much just one long path that spans all the way up to Windsor Castle. It's about 3 miles long total and ends at a statue of King George III. We saw a lot of people just walking, jogging, biking, and it was pretty cool to see the planes flying overhead too. And it was nice to feel like we were back in the countryside, surrounded by some cows as our last companions before we left London.